Hello and welcome to this special session of International IVF Initiative, which showcases the best of Alpha 2024. My name is Mina Alikani, and I'm the president of Alpha Scientists in Reproductive Medicine. I have the pleasure tonight of hosting this session with my colleagues Alison Campbell, vice president and acting treasurer of Alpha, and Christophe Blockeel, our favorite physician, I should say, and an executive board member of Alpha. I'd like to also acknowledge our other board members who are not on camera tonight. Sharon Mortimer, who was our immediate past president, Laura Rienzi, Dean Morbeck, and Hassan Berjak, as well as our newest members, Keshav Malhotra, who is a panelist tonight, and Irene Cuevas. Welcome to Alpha. We have also recently welcomed two Alpha ambassadors to the group, and they are Francesca Farley, who is working behind the scenes tonight, and Sasha Sadoi. We welcome both of them to Alpha. Now, as you may know, Alpha was founded in 1994, almost exactly 30 years ago, as an international society. And I emphasize that as an international society with a mission to advance the art and science of clinical embryology for the benefit of the public worldwide through international promotion of education, communication, and collaboration. We uphold that mission to this day, and our activities reflect that commitment. We held our biennial conference in Lisbon last May, June, which I'm pleased to say was a great success. One of the many highlights of the meeting, apart from the amazing roster of speakers, was a film that we produced with the title Global Voices in Embryology. The film features a series of interviews skillfully conducted, truly skillfully conducted, by i3's own Giles Palmer, who will be here in a short while, with some 40 embryology practitioners from different parts of the world. Today, we are showing 4 short excerpts of this film, focusing on 4 topics: education and training of embryologists, restrictions in the practice of ART in different countries, major challenges facing embryologists, and the question of what drives embryologists to do what they do, as difficult as the job is. So each video clip is then followed by a panel discussion, and we encourage you to participate and add your voice to these discussions. Alison?
Thank you, Mina. Great introduction to this very exciting webinar. So I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Mina Alikani. Mina is a clinical embryologist and also a high complexity lab director in assisted human reproduction with very many years of experience in our field. She's also an editor of Reproductive Biomedicine Online. She's a mentor and an educator and a consultant in ART, a very brilliant woman. And we also have Professor Blockeel. He's worked in the field of fertility for more than 20 years with an interest primarily in reproductive endocrinology. And he served as the president of the Belgian Society for Reproductive Medicine from 2017 until 2020. And since 2024, he is the chair of the special interest group, Reproductive Endocrinology of ESHRE. Christophe.
Thank you, Alison. And let me now introduce you, since you are the vice president of this wonderful society, Alpha Scientists in Reproductive Medicine, and also on the editorial boards of Human Reproduction and Reproductive Biomedicine Online. Alison, you are the CSO, or the Chief Scientific Officer of the Care Fertility Group, overseeing 19 IVF laboratories across the UK, Ireland, but also Spain and the United States. Consultant embryologist and fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists. You have published quite a lot in clinical embryology. So with this, I would like to, introduce the first short clip. And this will be dealing with regional differences in how an embryologist is trained and certified. I think we can go to the first video.
In Spain, people who want to become embryologist need to hold a bachelor degree in biology, biotechnology, biochemistry, or in related field. They also should hold a master's degree from the university or from private institutions that are specialized in human reproduction.
We're now working on getting our profession recognized and have certain legislations and training that we have to undergo in order to become a clinical embryologist, but this is a plan in the making.
So people, like myself, might not actually have the HCPC registration just yet, but we'll be working towards it and looking to get that in the next couple of years.
In Kuwait, you need to be licensed by the Kuwait Ministry of Health.
In Portugal, embryologists get their education with a BSc in life science or health science. It's the only thing needed. And the training is made in the labs of assisted reproduction clinics or centers.
No certification is required. There is no certifying body for embryologists in Ireland. So that isn't required, and to direct a lab, it's the same situation. There's no certification in Ireland that would be equivalent to other countries.
So in Canada, there's the certification program that is provided by the CFAS, but it's not required to be an embryologist. It's like a plus.
Mostly in Europe countries they will need to follow a theoretical training for 1 year, and they also need 6 months to practice training to get certificate.
You do need a bachelor's of science degree, but other than that, there's no certification requirement. After that, there are requirements to be lab supervisors, the technical supervisor certification through AAB, and then to be a lab director, you do need an HCLD, which is a high complexity lab director certification, and that in order to have that you need a PhD or an MD.
It has to be at least a bachelor's degree, and the major, they have to major in biologist. In our country, they have to be the qualified certificate before they starting the ART. For example, our country has a National Health Commission. There are some qualified institutions for them to do the training and the studying.
There is the AGRBM, that's the German Society of Human Reproductive Biology. And this society, it was founded already in 1994, and they have founded or developed a further education system. And for the professional recognition, human reproductive biology from our society, you have to fulfill a catalog, including 10 days of internship under the supervision of an external supervisor. And that takes about 3 to 4 years. And then you get a certificate which is recognized.
Until last year, 2023, there was no restriction for working in IVF lab for biologists. But since then, there is a strict rules come out, and the rules saying that even if you are a biologist and even if you are have a master degree, you have to go for upper level, which is PhD?
So it's preferred for embryologists to be certified by an embryology-related educational degree, but it's not a must. The Ministry of Public Health still do issue a medical license for embryologists by practice if they provide a paper to say that they have a long experience in a reputable IVF center.
So here in Barbados, there is no official need for certification. Obviously, the government, once you are hired for this position, they will make sure that you are educated on your field. So you definitely need at least a bachelor's of science in biology or biotechnology. And a master's is a bonus, but it's not a specific certification that you need to work as an embryologist.
So most of the people that get into the job within New Zealand have been to university and done a degree such as a Bachelor of Biomedical Science, and then they get a trainee position and mostly have hands-on training in the laboratory, or they will go to Australia to Monash University and do the Masters of Clinical Embryology there.
Basically, in France, it's historical. You have to be a doctor. Embryologists get their training as PD or MD that will specialize afterwards in clinical embryology and andrology during residency.
Great, very interesting. It's now my pleasure to introduce three colleagues who starred in the film to discuss what we just heard. Of course, we encourage our audience to also add their voice. Dr. Xavier Pollet-Villard is a physician and a clinical embryologist, as you heard in the video, and the head of the Nataliance Assisted Reproductive Technologies and Andrology Center in France. Dr. Debbie Montjean is a clinical and research embryologist, and since 2021 has worked as the director of IVF laboratories at fertility clinics in Canada. And Dr. Moses Tiri, also a physician by training, is a clinical embryologist at Neogenesis Fertility Center in Kampala, Uganda. So welcome and thank you for being here to participate in this discussion. I think just to start the discussion, what we might conclude from these descriptions in the video is that there's really no standard path to making clinical embryology your career. This is probably one reason for the shortage of embryologists in some parts of the world. And it seems that certification is largely not required, but a bachelor's degree is. So this is where we start, and I'd like to invite everyone to say whether this is their impression and how they perceive the situation with regard to education and training of clinical embryologists.
Xavier, if you hear all this, I think that it's quite rare that physicians are embryologists. What do you think? Do you think it is really an added value? Because if I recall well, in France, embryologists also make clinical decisions or not?
Well, it depends. We make a lot of clinical decision when it comes to andrology, because we have to have both trainings. When you tell me if it makes a difference, I mean, it is quite obvious that you don't need to be a physician to be an embryologist. You can be very skilled. We have technicians that are working in the lab. they cannot be lab director and they have the equivalent of a bachelor in science, but you have really outstanding technicians. So I don't think you need to be a physician to be an embryologist, that's for sure. However, when I heard Alison from the US, she said that some physicians are becoming lab director, and I think it's a good thing to have at least a PhD with a training in medical and reproductive science to have a good overview of what is happening, because we cannot stick to a purely lab vision. We have to have a better understanding of the process. And again, we could say that we don't need to be a physician to have this understanding. We need training, good training. So that's my view. And I mean, the system is like that in France, and it poses some issues sometimes, I think, because most of the physicians, they are not really trained like PhDs, you know. PhDs are very science-oriented, issue-solving oriented, and sometimes we physicians, we lack the training in this kind of thing. We are more into dealing with the patients, understanding the patient in his globality. So that's my point of view for the subjects. And I think that Debbie has also a point of view because she has been working in France too. So
Yes, Debbie, please.
Yeah, actually, I share Xavier's point that you don't necessarily need to be a physician to be an embryologist. It's a plus, as he say, that he has that the medical doctors have this training with communicating with patient, but it's there's a lack for troubleshooting in the lab, but it works pretty well. It's not the case here in Canada. We have the lab director has to be not has to be, but is usually a PhD or a master's. He holds a master's degree at least, with consequent experience in embryology. So both scenario work very well.
Maybe Moses can add.
Yeah, I do agree with Dr. Xavier and Debbie that the qualification of an MO doesn't really add much as a prerequisite to become a good embryologist, skilled. My background as a doctor, well, I think it doesn't really add much to what I currently do in the field of embryology. Mainly in the lab, I don't get to make many clinical decisions. So I do agree with Dr. Xavier and Debbie. In Uganda, we don't have much of regulation to either guide the training or certification. And what we depend on is training abroad. We go to countries like UK, Egypt, South Africa to acquire this training. So you're really dependent on the requirements for training in these places. And when you come back to Uganda, it's there's no specific requirement for certification. You're dependent on the local medical councils to guide your practice, and also morally, you try to do what is right, really, to practice and offer the best for your clients. Yeah.
Alison, what is the situation in the UK? Can you sum that up for us?
Yeah, well, we have quite a well-structured and established system for embryology training and certification now. So we have the scientist training program, which was set up by the government. It's a 3-year program in a clinic, which covers both the practical and theoretical academic training. And also, if you want to progress, once you've got your state registration, so to speak, there are other pathways for development, which I think is really unusual and really great for people living in the UK with careers in embryology. So we can do a higher specialist training program, which results in a PhD. We can also get into the Royal College of Pathologists as a consultant level. So that really gives us parity with our clinical colleagues. So it's pretty well established, and there are several master's courses as well. So there are other routes to gaining state registration, with portfolios and other training schemes. So we have options, but it does worry me actually that there are lots of training programs around the world which seem very much focused on the practical element, and they neglect the academic element and the other skills that are clearly required for an embryologist. So I know there's a shortage, but it's hard, and we need to do what we can together, I think, to enable better education to accompany those technical training programs somehow.
It's interesting that you say that, because my impression is actually the opposite, that you know, there are plenty of programs, university programs, and degree programs that may get a young person who's interested in embryology as a field prepared on the theoretical grounds, and give them the base knowledge that they need to apply as a clinical embryologist. But it's the practical training that is such a major issue. If you look through the ads that come in for embryologists, almost everyone will say, with 3 years of experience, with 2 years of experience, with 4 years of experience. Where are the young people going to get this experience if there are not enough hands-on training programs where they can go in and learn how to do things? And then training people from scratch while on the job is so labor intensive, very, very difficult. So
yeah, I think that a lot of the hands-on programs are really short crash courses, and that's not enough. They need to be in a clinic working alongside embryologists, watching, learning, sharing cases. So it's very hard for people trying to get all of the skills that are required, because we know there are vast skill set, even compassion and the communication skills that we've talked about earlier. It's quite a unique set of skills, I think, that we have as embryologists.
A question from the chat that is very correlated with this is, do young people know, are they aware how to apply to become an embryologist? Because of course this is the first step. And I think it's true, because in Belgium also the situation is so broad. You're going to study biomedical science or biology or even veterinary school, because maybe people are not aware about about how to become an embryologist. Is it, to the panelists, maybe general, maybe each of you can answer that, is awareness okay for young people with regard to embryology or not?
I don't think so. I think we're doing our best. I think the new movie on Netflix called Joy, about the story of the first IVF baby, things like that will raise awareness. At least in the NHS, IVF has made its way finally into the GCSE education program. So this is about age, I'll probably get it, 14 to 16. So it's starting to infiltrate, which I think is important. And we have a program, I think it's an international STEM ambassadors. So all of us could go around into schools and sixth forms and colleges and try and bang the drum and raise awareness. But I don't think there is a vast awareness really of this as a career path.
Exactly. Moses, do you want to add something to that?
Well, here in Africa, Uganda in particular, I think there's a lot of lack of awareness. I've met a lot of young people who come asking about how to apply to different, where to apply to study embryology, and I think we have a lot to do to create awareness amongst high school or university students who are studying the initial bachelor's of science degrees, that there's a path that they can take. I think for me, I probably, if I knew that there was a direct path from my first degree, I probably would have gone there first, other than first doing a master's. Then, so we have a lot to do to create awareness among this Bachelor of Science people.
Yeah.
Well, okay. For France, I mean, of course, it's peculiar as we said, because this kind of advertising, if you want to be a lab director, would be done after the residency. And okay, what do you want to do? If you want to do pathology, because what happened to me, I wanted to do pathology, to do neuroimmunology, and then I visited by accident an IVF lab. And I was smitten. I saw an oocyte, and I was just smitten that minute, and I changed completely my direction in pathology, and I chose embryology. But advertising, I never knew that this specialty existed until I visited this lab. And so I think there is a lack of advertising, maybe, for the future embryologists in France, and also for the technician. There is no practical training for the technicians, for example, in France, that could actually work in an IVF lab. So yes, we have a lot of things to do. We are trying in France to do also practical training, but it's kind of difficult. And then I think that the good thing is to be able to do some shadowing. So to find a mentor and to follow a mentor for like 6 months, 1 year, to really benefit from the experience. But again, that's really hard to find.
So I think, yeah, the conclusion is that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We need to increase awareness about the profession of clinical embryology, and get the profession to be actually recognized in more parts of the world. I mean, there was a paper that was published nearly 10 years ago about the professional status of the clinical embryologist and clinical embryology as a field. And I don't know how much progress we have made to make this profession known. And so I think we have work to do in that area, increasing awareness and making the path to becoming a clinical embryologist and making it a career for yourself much more clear than it is now. So with that, we will move on, I think, to the second video this is a segment that focuses on a question regarding restrictions on ART services. We asked several questions. Among them were, are treatments available in your country without discrimination? For example, to single individuals of any gender, LGBTQ+ people, and others. And does your government restrict ART procedures, or are care providers allowed to practice ART as they see appropriate? So now let's listen to the answers that we received.
In Spain, the use of gamete donation and reproductive treatments for single and lesbian couples is permitted. However, surrogacy, it is not allowed, regardless of whether they are single or in couples. And also, there is the impossibility of knowing the sex of the embryo to be transferred.
We don't have a proper legislation yet concerning the members of the LGBTQ community, but I believe we're getting there. Other than that, our legislation is constantly changing and evolving concerning both donors, their anonymity or not, surrogacy.
Yes, treatments such as gamete donation or surrogacy are prohibited in Kuwait according to the law.
What is allowed, the IVF procedure is only allowed for married couples.
Yes, in Poland we have our Infertility Treatment Act from 2015, and unfortunately it allows only the treatment of heterosexual couples. So for them, donation, embryo oocyte and semen donation is allowed. Surrogacy isn't allowed. Pre-implantation genetic testing is also allowed, but without non-medical sex selection.
In Ireland, we are awaiting the publication of the Assisted Human Reproduction Bill, which was officially released in 2022, and we're waiting for that to become law. At the moment, we work in an absence of legislation in Ireland covering assisted reproduction, and we're very hopeful that that will come in. We're promised it'll come in 2024. In the absence of legislation in Ireland, we can freely offer treatment to LGBTQ single individuals, whether it be sperm donation, egg donation, reciprocal IVF, and the only area that is quite hindered is that of surrogacy. So in Ireland, no surrogacy is able to take place at the moment in the absence of legislation, mainly because we're erring on the side of caution.
Italian legislation has greatly limited us over the years. But fortunately, the situation is changed, and we can perform also PGT cycles and treatments involving gamete donation. Sadly, treatments for single people from LGBTQ+ community, and surrogacy as well are forbidden in Italy.
The reproductive rights of women and men in the United States are at risk currently with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. In terms of more specifically regarding our specific field, you know, we self-regulate and we pride ourselves on that. And I think that that's something that's important to maintain, and we need to just progress, and we just need to be careful and continue to maintain high standards.
So the laws in Cyprus are quite inclusive. It includes donation and surrogacy programs, treatment as singles, and also for couples. The only restriction is that the couple has to be either married or have a certificate of validated relationship.
There's always some room for improvement, but concerning laws and regulation, I think we have in Belgium a quite liberal and very well regulated law, so we can help all kind of couples and single persons and LGBTQ people. So I think concerning that, I think it's well regulated.
So all treatments are on paper available. There are certain restrictions that have now come into place with the new ART bill that's come up last year, which now bans commercial surrogacy within the country. So altruistic surrogacy is still happening. You can get your own surrogate, but compensation is not offered. So the cases have diminished. Also, you need special permissions for getting a surrogacy case approved, which have to come through the state as well as the national board, which makes the process very tedious for most patients to follow. As far as the LGBTQA community is concerned, IVF is completely off limits for them. And that's a sad scenario within our country. Even for single parents, single women can have babies, but for single men, we don't have provisions
For example, for individual person, individual patient, for LGBT patients, and I think all of them are illegal in Iran right now. They don't do anything for those patients that are looking for treatment or embryo or gamete donation or surrogacy.
Romania does not have specific art legislation. So our National Transplant Agency offers guidelines on what art procedures should be restricted. And it is also responsible for the accreditation of fertility clinics. On the most part, the guidelines offered are based on ESHRE guidelines. So the treatments that are available to anyone, regardless of their marital status or sexual orientation, and only anonymous gamete donation is available, so only from accredited oocyte or sperm banks. What is not permitted are known donor gamete donations, embryo donations, and surrogacy.
Well, the law in Iceland is sort of relatively, let's say, not laid back, but it doesn't forbid a lot of things. It does forbid surrogacy, but it allows for most donations. There is, of course, the limitation of the population, which is small in Iceland, just not even reaching 400,000. So we need to be aware of not having too many donors contributing to too many families. But indeed, there is no regulations when it comes to that. That's self-regulated by the clinic. So I think that the rule of thumb has been no more than 3 families created by the same donor.
We can do gamete donation, egg donation, sperm donation, and even embryo donation, but it is limited only for local people because the government doesn't want to attract foreigners for to get into Vietnam more for gamete donations. Surrogacy is also available, but it's very strictly regulated only for medical reasons, and the surrogate mother have to be relative of the couples. In Vietnam, the same-sex marriage is not acceptable, not recognized. It's acceptable. You can live together. It's quite okay, but it's not recognized by law. So those couples cannot access the assisted reproductive technology to have baby.
Germany has several limits, I have to admit. For example, egg donation is not allowed, while sperm donation is allowed. So, and this is lies in our complicated laws, because an embryo can only be transferred to the woman from which the egg originated from. And another point which is also not allowed is surrogacy. This is also not allowed because, again, in our law, it states that you become mother through giving birth. So you cannot give a surrogacy birth because that it will always be your own child. And not all federal states support the treatment of single moms or LGBTQ plus people. And we are not allowed to touch any embryo doing research on it. So we have 16 federal states in Germany, and not all support the same. So, for example, single moms or LGBTQ plus people in doing treatments for using ART. So that is somehow a problem. So you can go to Berlin as a single mom and as a LGBTQ plus female people and get a treatment. And in North Rhine-Westphalia, where I am from, you don't.
In general, we don't have restrictions, and treatments for the last years have been more and more inclusive for all kind of people and all kind of family projects. The only exception of this is surrogacy, which is not regulated in Chile and is not performed. It's not explicitly forbidden, but it's not regulated, so we don't do that.
There are very few, if any, limitations as to what can be offered. In terms of gamete donation, that is certainly allowed. There is no restriction on who can be offered fertility treatment. It is very transparent and open to all race groups, genders, sexual orientation, etc. There is no restrictions there.
So as you know, Qatar is a conservative Muslim country that follows the regulations and rules that do not go against any Islamic laws, and in all aspects of life. And infertility treatment is no exception. So IVF is only offered for heterosexual married couples and using their own gametes.
So in New Zealand, there's no restrictions on donations or singles or same-sex couples. We're allowed to treat everybody here.
At present, the unlicensed couples, such as people who are single individuals or LGBTQ, who have no legally marriage status, still cannot do ART in Thailand.
So we follow HFEA and ASRM as much as we can. So for example, we don't do surrogacy exactly because there are no laws and it can get very, very complicated. But government per se does not have any specific laws.
Like same-sex couples, it's not legal in Iraq. So by religion, by law, it's not legally to provide any services to this part of the community. Surrogacy, it's also is against the main religion in Iraq, which is Islam. Also, it's not allowed by law and by religion.
Okay, in Nigeria, no discrimination about gametes donation in terms of egg donation and sperm donation. Even surrogacy is actually being allowed. However, LGBTQ is not being done currently in Nigeria.
In Estonia, it's quite liberal. The only thing that is prohibited is obviously surrogacy and sex selection without medical needs.
Actually, in the Norwegian law on biotechnology, that went a major overhaul in 2021. So until 2021, a lot of techniques were not allowed. But now we are allowed to do a lot more treatments, for example, egg donation, proactive egg freeze. You're able to treat single women, your embryo donation between same-sex lesbian couples. But again, surrogacy is not allowed, even in cases where it is required, and also for homosexual men. So I think we're kind of marginalizing them. Also, I feel like double donation, where both you use the donor sperm and the donor egg, that's not allowed in Norway. So a lot of couples have to travel abroad to get that.
So the ART procedures are not restricted in Georgia, but they are highly regulated by our government. For example, in Georgia, single individuals are unable to access surrogate treatments, but gamete donation is allowed. But LGBTQ plus individuals are not legally permitted to undergo treatments in Georgia by law.
In regards to our laws and around access to treatment, I think it is really good. In Australia, we certainly do have very limited laws, I think, in regards to treating anyone who comes and needs IVF treatment, especially in LGBTIQ+, single mothers by choice, that sort of arena. We offer all aspects of gamete donation, surrogacy. We do a lot of gamete preservation for patients who are undergoing gender reaffirmation. So all of that, I think, is really well supported within Australian ART sector. And I think it's getting better every day. There's more and more effort put into educating the people who work in our spaces on diversity and how to have inclusive practice, including, you know, how we address our patients, the pronouns we use, everything. So I think Australia is a very inclusive place in that regard.
Thank you very much indeed. Quite spectacular how diverse regulations and laws and restrictions can be. But as Dr. Malhotra was stating in the chat, okay, laws, but are we taking care of improving patient care? So this is probably a very interesting statement that we can discuss. And with this interesting video, I would like to introduce three other stars of the video, namely Dr. Carol Loscher. Then we have Omar, Ammar, and Alexandra Spyrou. So Carol Loscher, she is embryologist, but she has a background in pharmacology, a PhD in genetics, and she entered the field of embryology and gathered a wealth of experience within Ireland's leading fertility clinics. So she is the lab manager at Therapy Fertility's new IVF laboratory in Ireland, and she is dedicated to enhancing accessibility and affordability for patients. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you.
And then we have Omar Ammar, a clinical embryologist with 8 years of experience working in research and IVF labs. He also worked on developing new ovarian tissue culture techniques as fertility preservation methods at the University of Oxford. Ammar, you obtained your master's degree in clinical embryology from the University of Dundee, but obviously you're also specialized in the situation in Iraq, your home country. And then last but not least, we have Alexandra Spyrou, who is our Greek colleague. She studied biology at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and she obtained her master's degree on human reproduction from the Department of Medicine at the University of Thrace. She has been working at the large IVF clinic in Athens, Institute of Life, since many years now. Thank you so much for joining us, to all three of you. Allow me to just ask a short question, which I did not get from the video. Omar Ammar, you were talking about, so LGBTQ obviously in Iraq is not allowed, but any donations, any oocyte donation, would that be allowed for a heterosexual couple or not at all?
Thanks, Christophe, for the amazing introduction. So in Iraq, IVF regulations and restrictions are mainly governed and regulated by the Islamic, I would say, jurisprudence. And actually, like, Islamic laws control health policies and therefore control IVF, and donation, whether it's eggs, embryos, or sperm, is completely prohibited for even heterosexual couples in Iraq. Although saying this, very recently this has been changed for very certain amount of scholars, Islamic scholars within the Shia sect in Iraq, where they now actually allow a gamete donation, not embryo donation, and this happens on very low scale or cross borders in Iran or in Greece.
Okay, thank you so much. So also quite some comments in the chat about Africa, but because apparently there is no real legislations there. For example, in Kenya, there is not at all any legislation with regard to the topics that we are discussing. So the question is, well, how can an organization operate in a country without regulations and regulatory bodies? So being too restrictive on one hand, but without any regulations, how would we make some progress? Maybe Carol, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I guess I don't know, for example, in Africa per se, but in our own country of Ireland, it's only very recently that we've actually approved a law, only this year in 2024, where we have the Health Assisted Human Reproduction Act that was created. It has yet to be enacted. However, we are regulated heavily by more like a medical, the HPRA is what we call it, which is more of a medical kind of regulated, more like a pharmaceutical industry. But we also comply to the EU Tissue and Cells Directive. So while we have regulation, it's not our own country's regulation, but it is a European-wide legislation that we adhere to. So I think it's a fascinating discussion about whether, you know, self-regulation, and obviously there's always a risk for exploitation. I think this is where legislation comes into play, that it's a lot about trying to ensure that our tissue establishments are licensed, that they're performing with high quality laboratories, protecting whether, you know, patients' rights, whether it be a genetic reason to know your genetic parentage in the case of donor gametes, or whether it's, you know, protecting or be able to use gametes posthumously after someone may have died, and the rights involved in that, and then onto surrogacy and the parental rights over an intending parent. So I think, like, it's so wide ranging, I guess, is the issue, that assisted human reproduction has so many facets, and I think regulation is important. And I don't know if we can leave it to individual clinics or individual entities to regulate, because there's so much, it's so vast.
Exactly. Regulations are required, as somebody states, to prevent exploitation of vulnerable patients by physicians. So the physicians are, of course, always extremely dangerous. Anyway, so Alexandra, could I ask you a question, and maybe the other panelists could also jump in with regard to this question, because how do we balance the increasing speed of innovation in our field in ART, from one hand, with the slow ability for any given state to regulate, talking about PGTP, for example, mitochondria donation, future potential to create gametes from epithelial cells, and so on. So this is of course an enormous discrepancy. Will it slow our ability to increase success rates in the coming years, you think, Alexandra?
You mean the lack of legislation to follow in the progress of
this is
our
completely
field?
Yeah,
I think so. I'm afraid so, actually. And mostly in countries, I should say mine too, where legislation does not follow the
innovation.
Yes, it does not. It does not follow the innovation of the field. It does not allow many new techniques to be applied. It is very skeptical. It's hard. It's hard battling laws and restrictions all the time.
So maybe also from the Alpha Society, Mina and Alison, I'm looking at you also. What could or should a society do in trying to enhance these possibilities? I'm also looking at France, because even PGTA is forbidden in France. Can you imagine?
I can imagine. That's a very, very big issue, because on the first hand, we know that PGTA is not going to, especially in young patients, improve the cumulative life birth, which is what we should try to do. But in so many cases, we in France would love to have PGTA. I'm talking about advanced maternal age patients with repeated implantation failure, because I mean, if you don't have any euploid embryo, you will be classified in France as repeated implantation failure. And this is something we would like to know, and we can't basically right now. And also there was a paper recently that said, by, for example, testing 3PNs embryos that got to the blastocyst stage, we could improve the number of euploid embryos that could be transferred. And so I think this is a very, very big mistake from the regulator in France to totally forbid this technique, which in a very high number of cases could help the patient. However, when we think about innovation, I think that my opinion is that we should be able to have regulation that will enable regulators or scientific society to monitor the new technology. Because in Europe, most of the time we have this kind of habits to regulate before we innovate, you know, and it actually hampers innovation. We should do the other thing around. We should regulate after innovation has been done. And the only way to do it is to be able to monitor correctly. So I think the issue of regulation comes with the issue of monitoring, but let's hear what you have to say about that.
Thank you. Other people who would like to comment on the fact that maybe innovation is hindered by it all? Alison?
Well, I was just going to give a UK perspective, because we have the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority, and we have regulation and we have laws, but they have a committee, an advisory committee, which I think is a really great way to scan the horizon and to look for future innovations. So even a couple of months ago in the last meeting, on their agenda, they have mitochondrial donation, stem cell-based embryo models, so blastoids and in vitro derived gametes. So they're really trying to look ahead so that they can preempt and so that they could start, because we all know that changing laws and regulations takes a really long time. So with that in mind, maybe that could be the role of societies like Alpha to spoon feed the authorities around the world to scan the horizon on their behalf, to put expert groups together to do exactly that, because otherwise they've got other priorities and then have a lack of funding, generally speaking. So it's no surprise that they move slowly and they can't keep up. And so in turn, that could help. If we can help them preempt, then maybe things could move a little bit faster and prepare for the future, for our future patients.
I agree with Alison. I think there's a role to be played by professional societies, including our own Alpha, to educate regulators, because without that, they will always go too far. You know, they like to ban things, and rather than addressing how could this technology be abused and how can we prevent the abuse of the technology. I think, you know, I think the topic of surrogacy is a good example in this context, because a lot of, as we heard, a majority of the countries that were represented on this video prohibit surrogacy. Now, one could say that surrogacy is a very complex issue. And yes, it can be abused. And unfortunately, we have seen that in the United States just recently. And this found its way to the press. And then, of course, it's making us look irresponsible. And so there is a point in regulating treatments like surrogacy, but not banning them, because then you will exclude a legitimate group of people who cannot procreate in any other way. So I think educating the regulators and also understanding their role in ensuring that these technologies are safe and that they are not abused, because we know that they can be.
Exactly. Regulators also should be collaborating with us, with the physicians, with scientists, and with people working on the floor. Anybody else to give a comment?
I just want to say that I think this open dialogue between societies and regulators is very important to prevent two possible future scenarios, the Brave New World, but also to prevent a scenario like the Handmaid's Tale, which is, I think, they always should be working together, the regulators and the societies like Alpha.
All right, thank you very much. And now I would like to hand over to Mina to introduce the.
I think, right, I think Alison is introducing the next one, challenges. Or did we get, did I get it wrong?
No, it's Christophe. Christophe is got it wrong.
Christophe,
it's fine. I can do it.
Well, then it is my extreme honor and pleasure to introduce you to the next interesting video about challenges. What are the challenges that we are coping with?
Well, God, there's many challenges. But if we talk about running high-performing labs, it's bringing in new technology, ensuring that all the new technology that is out there, and there is a lot, and there is a lot coming in AI, and everyone's competing for the next greatest thing. You know, IVF is it's a commercial space. And it's very competitive, is trying to make sure that everything you put in your lab has been properly vetted, you know, that you've looked at it from a scientific perspective. It does improve patient outcome. It doesn't do any harm, and trying to manage all of that and then integrating it, you know, training all your scientists in it, making sure everyone understands why they're doing what they're doing. It is becoming a very fast moving space from a science and clinical offering.
The biggest challenge in Spain is the financial support for the research.
Since we have now this registry in 2024, no patient can undergo an embryo transfer without getting permission from the national authority that checks the donation registry. And that is a very time-consuming procedure, both for us and for the patient and for the gynecologists.
Well, I think, especially in this time, any conflicts could happen in the area, could really affect this sector or the ART. Why? I can answer this in another way, because almost all our disposable, all our media, all our equipments, they are imported. So, which means that any instability could lead to a total shutdown of the market.
I think the biggest challenge in clinical embryology in Portugal, it's the situation of embryologists not being clear. The formation, we have been changing. Now we have a master in Portugal, but not really be clear in the legislation what the embryologists need to do to train and their profession. That's why a lot of young adults have been immigrating to other countries.
Certainly at the top of the list is that we don't have enough embryologists to keep up with the demands and the increasing volume of cycles that are coming through. And that's all, you know, underneath that is the lack of educational programs, the lack of training, and it all contributes to each other.
I think the biggest challenge now will be the implementation of artificial intelligence and how people will deal with that, because there is a little bit, how you say it, anxious about it, that we will not need technicians anymore or embryologists anymore, that computers and other tools will take over. So I think we will need to implement that in a correct way, and we will not be unnecessary, I think, but to convince everybody that our expertise will be on another level.
I think the biggest challenge that I feel is getting good embryologists to work within the unit itself. There is so much competition within the country itself. There are IVF clinics that are still mushrooming across the country. And it's very difficult for clinics to actually retain embryologists and retain good staff because, I mean, they just jump from one center to the other. And it's difficult to compete with certain corporates that are coming within the system. I think that would be my biggest challenge as of now.
And one of the biggest challenge is having access to the newest facilities, equipments, solutions.
Smaller challenges, let's say. One of them I do think is the lack of an official program or degree that people can take and obtain their training, because it's quite difficult to obtain training on the job when you're working in a fertility clinic that obviously deals with real patients. The legislation as well, the lack of legislation actually. It would be great for Romania to have official art legislation that can address all the possible situations that we face today, such as single females or males, same-sex couples, surrogacy, etc.
And I think the biggest challenge is again the size of the market, if you like, the population that's seeking help. It's just 600-700 treatments per year, and that gives limited possibilities to offer. I mean, sort of all these new available techniques when it comes to using the old word PGS and PGTAS and all these genetical screening possibilities where you need certain volumes to keep up your training and your capabilities.
I think the biggest challenge for the clinical embryology development in Vietnam is the training. So we need more kind of basic training program and specialized for clinical embryology.
I think the biggest challenge in Germany is that we really need people who are coming to clinical embryology and want to do clinical embryology. So we do not have enough people entering the field. That is our biggest problem.
Standardized practices. I think that should become from health authorities.
Educational, I guess, especially to being forced to have a PhD level is quite a difficult challenge because people needs to be work when they graduate their schools. So to put a PhD level for working in the IVF lab, meaning that you have to study until 30s in the university. Afterwards, they allow people to work in IVF labs. I think this is the main challenge. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, they make it quite difficult for biologists to work in IVF field. Because in some similar disciplines like biochemistry or microbiology, the people who are directing those labs are doctor originated. This is tough to be an embryologist, so they may give up studying and they may choose another work.
I think that as a whole, the profession, I believe, doesn't get the recognition or the credit that it deserves. And sometimes day to day, that can be hard to deal with because, you know, as embryologists, you know the time and effort that you've put into your, you know, education, training, and your day-to-day accountability and professional development.
I do believe training. We do require training. 3 months training cannot make anyone an expert. We even know that even if you do an MSc, you'll still be trained on the job. So I do believe that physicians, we don't have RAIs. I mean, gynecologists are well trained in fertility treatment. And again, we don't have those 2 lab techs with 3 months of training will not keep us very far. So I do believe training is one of the biggest challenge.
it's very challenging for embryologists to explain what people who don't work in the field cannot understand easily, or do not know the nature of IVF, the criticality of IVF in general. So when you're establishing a new clinic, you find it a bit challenging to let all the supporting services cooperate and to facilitate our work.
So the biggest challenge for me as an embryologist is the procurement of media equipment in time and in good quality, and also getting training locally, being able to train other colleagues locally would be a good thing. Those two are really the main challenges that I have.
Law is the most big challenge too, because there are many limitations to do ART in Thailand.
For us, the additional cost is people to travel here and stay here for the treatment. So although we feel that we are a very good clinic and we have amazing staff, it can be a little bit stressful at times that we need to make sure that we have enough patients to sustain our practice.
In my country, Nigeria, I would say the biggest challenge to this profession, clinical embryology, would be the economy. When we talk about training opportunities, some of these trainings actually don't come cheap, and individually, and you might not be able to sponsor, an individual might not be able to sponsor his or herself as regards this. So sometimes I know some clinics, my clinic in Nordica actually helps to sponsor the embryologists in terms of trainings to improve their knowledge on the profession. So the challenge would be, the biggest challenge would be the economy.
We've seen there's been a big drop in the number of NHS funded cycles over the last 5 years. More and more people are turning to private clinics. And that's all well and good. And obviously, as I work in a private clinic, it's really good for the business. But what does that mean for the patients? Can all patients access these often very expensive treatments? Is there the potential that it might create separation of those who can, those who can't? We certainly wouldn't want to see that.
IVF, as I said, is fully reimbursed by the national health insurance in France, but it's poorly reimbursed. So maybe if it was reimbursed a little bit more, we could maybe equip our lab much better. As you can see, my lab is one of the exceptions. I'm well equipped. It's behind me. You can see we have, state-of-the-art equipment, but it's not the case everywhere in France.
I think getting trained, both not just for the clinical embryology, but also getting trained IVF specialist, it's a big thing. And then that leaves us for recruiting international candidates. The problem with the international candidates is that they have to learn to speak Norwegian, because you are going to, there's a lot of communication that happens between the patient and the embryologist. So not everybody is so happy or so keen to learn a new language, and then they just leave. So there's like a turnover.
There is not enough embryologists, not enough Georgian embryologists that they want to work here. They are not trained, so most of the embryologists are from other countries here.
So I was thinking about what are the challenges for embryology in New Zealand, and I think it comes down to staffing. And I was thinking, why is staffing an issue? And I was thinking most embryologists are young people, and young people want to and also need to travel and experience the world and experience different labs and experience different ways of doing things. But that means there's high staff turnover. And because in New Zealand there's no formal training programs, they need to learn how to be an embryologist somewhere. And as I said, from New Zealand, if you want some formal training, you need to go to Monash University in Australia, which to some people is not accessible because of the cost. So there's a lot of on-the-job training in New Zealand.
Welcome back. That was so interesting. And I feel a little bit heavy-hearted because there are clearly so many challenges facing us as a profession from all around the world. So we heard about regulatory challenges, the economy, conflict, lack of financial support for R&D and equipment, and of course back again to the recruitment and retention, training and education of embryologists. So whilst we're all feeling a bit, I just want to say something that coming up in 10 minutes or so is the most phenomenal, heartwarming video. So please don't be too disheartened. Let's talk about the challenges and then look forward to our hearts being warmed with a beautiful video at the end. So in order to do this next discussion, I am very honoured to be able to introduce Giles Palmer. He is an experienced embryologist with over 30 years of experience, and he is the executive director of I3 and was absolutely instrumental, as we heard before, in putting these videos together. And alongside him, we have Dr. Keshav Malhotra from India, a leading ASHRAE certified clinical embryologist, and he's the vice chair of embryology for ISAR. He's the chairman of the SIG Embryology at Aspire and an executive board member of ISPAT and ACE. So lots of credentials there. And he's the lab director of ART Rainbow IVF, and he also leads META, which is a training academy. So we're very much needed for IVF professionals. So welcome to both of you. So I'd like to start, if that's all right with you, Keshav. And you mentioned in the video about the challenges around recruitment and retention of embryologists. So can you just bring that to life a little bit for us? How hard is it to find trained embryologists and to keep hold of them in your clinic?
I think this is probably the hardest aspect of working in a country like India. I think when we recorded this video, I had very specific challenges, and those were retaining embryologists. But now, because the field has rapidly evolved, especially in our country with the new bill, I'm seeing that there are multiple embryologists who are entering into the field in India. About 400 to 500 embryologists actually graduate every year, but they're not formally trained. And that's the biggest challenge. I think lots of people in the chat are also speaking about training, about spending time in the laboratories, and we just don't have those facilities. So here you have 500 new youngsters who are raring to go, who are wanting to contribute, but there is such a dearth of opportunities for them because we can't hire embryologists with less than 3 years of experience. Where do they get this experience? I mean, it's baffling to me that the framework is such that there is so much struggle that is like written in the journals of these embryologists. It's very, very difficult right now. I also feel that that education as such is something which really needs to improve within our country. Definitely the master's courses that are available need to be up there. Again, with Alpha, I think it would be wonderful if a consensus statement could be built up on like standards for embryology. What are the minimum qualifications that are required for becoming an embryologist? It's something that's not there. And I think it would do wonders for countries like ours.
Do you think it would be more useful standards in terms of training standards or standards in terms of the laboratory and practices? I guess we need both, but which would you prioritize?
I definitely feel that I would prioritize training standards as of now. I feel that if an embryologist is well qualified, obviously the lab is important, but if an embryologist is well qualified and if we are trained to handle the kind of equipments that are there in bare minimum like standard laboratories, we'll still be able to produce results. For a country like ours, it's very difficult. There are, like it was mentioned in the video, that there are more than 1,000 clinics. I would like to refer, like in the new guidelines, in the new registry, India has over 6,000 clinics. It's very difficult to go ahead and establish minimum standards because the country is so vast. There are rural areas, there are urban areas, there are
extremely metropolitan cities, but then there are extremely poor cities as well. So having like standards for the laboratories is very difficult. But having good staff is something that we can really emphasize upon. And I'm sure when we have good staff, we'll be able to give at least good results to our patients.
I think that's the secret, good staff, isn't it? And education and training, but it's not always straightforward. Should we move on to new technologies? And we heard about some people feeling anxious about the implementation of new technology. Giles, what would you like to say?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there was two things that I'd take away from that last segment. One was the challenges of staff, and that never seems to go away. And we spoke about, getting the recruitment, but it's also like the succession training that, as a more mature embryologist leave, we need to have the embryologists, and they have to, find their way. And I think it's up to us to, to guide them in that sense. But it was interesting, as you said, about hearing about the technology, because it's yet another thing that the embryologist has to do. There are many roles that we have, but of course one of them is like validating new technology. Perhaps never before has there been so much, to take on board with the labs. It's always been changing, since the early days we had, when like freezing came along, when hatching, when biopsy did. So it's, a fantastic thing about this job is it's always changing, but it seems like we have to be, experts in this new technology. And there's certainly a lot of anxiety, around that. One of it is to like validate the equipment. Okay. And that's another job which we have. But also we saw from videos and from comments before, it's people that don't have access also to this technology as well. So again, there is this discrepancy around the world with people that have that technology, or even the clinics that have the funding, and other ones that don't. But it's just another way to see that our job is ever changing, and our challenges are ever increasing, I think.
Well said. Alison, did you want to pose any other questions, or do we move on?
Well, I was looking at the clock. We've got a lot. We've been through a lot. We've covered a lot of things. Any of the panel got anything they'd like to talk about? Challenges?
I think there's also a leadership vacuum, something that's not really discussed much. I know that there are certain countries that would have a PhD requirement for lab directors, but there are countries that don't have any requirements. There are countries where there are no formal education pathways for directorship. And that's something that is required now. There's like in our country, there are so many corporate chains that are coming up, handling hundreds of embryologists within their units, but there's no lack of formal training for them. It's a difficult scenario. And again, professional bodies really need to contribute towards bridging this gap.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we move on to the fourth video clip, which asks the question of what keeps you motivated and what do you love about your job. And this, I have to say, is one of our favorite clips, and so enjoy.
Oh, very lovely question. I love my job, and I think that the most important thing is I know something. I've been studying for years, and I'm so happy that with the knowledge I have and my team have, the knowledge that my team have can help somebody to get their dream. And that is amazing.
I really love this job because it gives me the opportunity to provide true moments of happiness to couples that struggle to have a baby.
I love everything about my job, and I love this saying: if you love what you do, you will never work a day in your life.
Yeah, of course, helping people to build their own family is very it's an honor for us and a privilege.
As soon as I found out that in vitro fertilization exists, I wanted to become an embryologist.
To teach new generation. I've been working more than 20 years now, and I think it's very important the senior embryologists transmit the knowledge to young, because with all this development of new techniques, you always need to have a base of how the things are.
I think when you see baby the hand of our mothers, and the mother is very, very happy, the couple is very happy, they take a healthy baby at home, this is our satisfaction. They motivate a lot every day.
Helping patients to realize their dreams, to get a pregnancy, to get a baby.
One thing I love about my job is I love being able to share what I've learned with everybody in the lab and everybody that I work with, and to see that kind of click. And because everything about this field and this science is so exciting to me, because it's still so new and there's still so much that we don't know.
You see that baby and you hold that baby and you share with them that emotion. I think that's the biggest reward.
It's really a fantastic work, because seeing the one by one step from the very cleavage embryo to the blastocyst to the transfer.
I'm still enjoying doing IPSI and PGT and working in a very nice group of people that are all motivated and are all enthusiastic. So that keeps me motivated.
Something new that comes up every single day, and just being in a field where you have the opportunity to read about things, where the field itself is advancing at a rapid pace.
So the biggest thing I think is that you really feel that you're helping people. You know, witnessing a freshly retrieved egg develop into a blastocyst never fails to amaze me. It's a very fulfilling and rewarding job. And you can see the results very quickly, which is wonderful.
Seeing the smile on the face of the patient, maybe it's unbelievable, but when our patient have the good results, we are more than the patient happy. And I think we are happier than the patient.
When a patient who is tough cases get pregnant after IVF treatment, which I take part in it, I feel a sense of achievement.
Well, I think that's what everybody would say. I mean, sort of the given answer is working with something that helps people, you know, get the child in the end, hopefully. But I mean, I think that when you at least have worked as a laboratory manager, then it becomes a little bit even more exciting when it comes to, I mean, you have a whole clinic to think of, interacting with it is this team work where we usually don't get as a laboratory person. You get involved with patient treatments, even if it's just on a small scale, and then you have research which is often sort of not so interdisciplinary when working with you know in the lab. It's a bonus to be able to be a part of, you know, big randomized controlled trials sometimes, or just a small laboratory test. So I think that's sort of it's a dynamic world still, even if it's sort of been a more and more regulated and I don't know, fixed world compared to how it was 20 years ago.
Our embryologists, they love their job because they have kind of the feeling of doing something great for people.
This is something which motivates me most. And I love to have the contact with the patients and then see the joy which we might bring to them.
To make our best effort in terms of quality, in terms of excellence, and also with the empathy to give our patients their very best opportunity to have a successful treatment.
I love the team that I work with.
the patients that I come into contact with, the doctors that I work with, that they are really a good family to me. I know that sounds corny, but I really have enjoyed my environment that I work in.
Actually touching people's lives and seeing everything, everyday different things is very motivating for me.
Okay, two things. Basically, the challenge and the impact.
I never get bored because there's a lot of things going on. There's always something new to learn.
So what I love about my job was seeing good outcomes at the end of a day or 5 days of culture, and also down later on seeing these good outcomes turn into pregnancies and then deliveries achieved for people who had difficulty.
But as a manager, the part I really love is looking for improvements in the quality of the care, and whether that's in lab protocols and efficiencies and lab safety, or improving the experiences for patients through patient surveys, complaints or incidents, just always looking for places to improve. And the other part that I like about being a manager is training new staff and supporting scientists to achieve their goals. It's really satisfying seeing people expand their knowledge and skills, increase their confidence, and then in turn they can contribute to the lab processes and improvements.
To watch the embryo growing, that is very cute, very cute and very lovely to look at them, to culture them, or to nurture them.
I think it has changed over the years, which is very interesting to me. Starting 15, 16 years ago, it was all about the outcomes and the patients and the babies that we were seeing, which was lovely, and it's still one of the reasons. But now, moving into a managerial position, I get a lot of inspiration from my staff, which is amazing to me. I love seeing people being inspired by me and being inspired by them, and working together and resolving things as a team is just magical.
Working in embryology in an IVF lab, it requires a great deal of attention to details. It needs to be you need to be updated. You need to be very committed to have discipline, to have your time really planned very well. And I like to have tangible outcomes and planning. Oh, there's a lot that keeps me motivated in IVF. These beautiful laboratories, which, we get to operate in every day, and this, the equipment and how you just, growing beautiful blastocysts like that still every day. I think that is absolutely amazing. The people I work with, the scientists are exceptional who work in IVF laboratories. Embryologists are a very unique type of scientists who are just obsessive and pedantic and attention to detail, but also incredibly good communicators, incredibly empathetic and caring about everything they do. And I think working in that environment with these teams of people, creating beautiful embryos and helping people achieve a family is just an amazing place to work every day. And then even that interlocking in with all of the, the departments we work with, the science, like the nurses, our beautiful admin teams, the clinicians, everyone. Like it really is, a pretty exceptional place to work. And it's every day is different, so there's nothing routine and boring about IVF, that's for sure.
The little manipulations that we do, and it's actually a big deal. So that alone gives me joy every day, no matter how tasking the profession may be.
You can have, put your hands in a lot of different areas, whether that's doing, more patient-focused stuff or doing the procedures such as pickups, ICSIs. You might have the opportunity to do a biopsy, embryo grading, you know, some focus on the sperm lab and some transportation process. You know, you might be training new staff or doing some research projects or, you know, learning in seminars. So that's always a very interesting side.
I think to be an embryologist, you have to also be a people person. And I definitely think the best embryologists are. And the beautiful thing about being a clinical embryologist is that you get to do both of those things at the same time. So you get to follow the science, you get to see those amazing advances that are being made in the field of reproductive science, but you're also having such important interaction with the patients.
Oh, I think IVF is a wonderful profession. Just the fact that you can make a difference in somebody else's lives, I think is like, and I feel really honored to be able to do that.
My biggest motivation and what I'm motivated is by the success of the patients, of course, the success with new technologies implemented by us in our country.
Yeah. What keeps me motivated? Well, I think that's, you know, IVF is one of the only fields where tasks are very repetitive, but it feels new for every cycle, and it's exciting for every cycle when you perform them. It's really interesting to see that. We don't see this in any jobs, you know.
What do I love about the job? I love everything about the job. At the risk of sounding like a little kid, I love going in early in the lab when all the lights are out and turning on all the lights. I love listening to the sounds of the incubators and of all the computers, of all the machines working in the lab. I love the fact that we expect a certain number of eggs at a patient, and we get a certain number of eggs. I love doing ICSI, because when you do ICSI, you try to create new life. I love everything about the job, everything that is behind the job. You help someone conceive a child, you help bring life into the world, and you do that by constantly learning, by being disciplined, by constantly checking all the machinery that you have in the laboratory. I love every aspect of my job. I love my job.
Wow.
That's
How amazing is that?
I must have watched this, I don't know, 20, 30 times, and each time it just touches my heart. I think it's a beautiful representation of who clinical embryologists are, and it shows above all their passion to help build families. And that is truly something to be proud of. I promised Xavier that I wouldn't cry, because Alison and I were both in tears when we first presented this film. But in any case, with that, it's been a long session. Thank you so much for staying. Let me thank my colleagues, Alison and Christophe, for co-hosting this session. And I'm really grateful that you are a part of Alpha, and I can call you friends. I'd like to invite all of you to our wonderful audience to go to the Alpha website, learn more about us, and join Alpha if you are not already a member. Your membership will support initiatives such as this film and the many educational programs that we provide. Alison.
Thank you, Mina. So I just like to thank my co-hosts as well, Mina, Christophe. Really enjoyed it. And also our wonderful panel this evening. So Debbie Montjean, Xavier Pollet-Villard, Moses Tiri, Carol Loscher, Keshav Malhotra, Omar Ammar, and Alexandra Spyrou, and of course Giles Palmer and the I3 team. That's Jacques Cohen, Peter Nage, Mary-Anne Silvestres, Thomas Elliott, and Violetta Sora. A wonderful team. This could not have happened without everybody tonight. It's been amazing. Thank you. Christophe.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This was the final I3 webinar of 2024, and Alpha would like to take this opportunity also to extend our heartfelt thanks for your support and collaboration throughout the year. And as the holiday season approaches, we wish you joy and peace and not too many restrictions and laws and a lot of nice challenges, but also time to recharge as we look ahead to the new year. So we will be back in 2023 with the I3 team, and more engaging webinars, more initiatives will come. We are really looking forward to continue this journey together. Best wishes for the season and the year ahead. And the last words are for Mina.
With this, I really don't have much more to add. I just want to thank everyone again, and we will see you in 2025. Bye-bye.